Hello and welcome to the Google Apps tutorial series presented by SmartHR. My name is Alex Carlson. I am the Google Apps Administrator at SmartHR. In this edition of the series, we're going to be covering one of the most prominent apps within Google Apps Suite, that being Gmail. For obvious reasons, this is going to be your main communication app within your organization or outside of your organization, and many other reasons. You'll be using this quite often. Within this edition of the series, we'll discuss Gmail's interface, basic composing, editing, and sending of mail, working with the inbox and email, so the real nuts and bolts. Labels, which is a feature very similar to folders and other email services you may be familiar with. Searching our email, using filters to organize emails automatically, accessing Gmail settings and changing those to fit our needs, using tasks and contacts within Gmail, a really nifty feature of Gmail called Labs, and lastly, we'll discuss Hangouts a little bit since that integrates with Gmail so well. Okay, so before we delay anymore, let's go ahead and get right into it. We'll start with Gmail's interface, and I'm going to go ahead and launch my Gmail here. Okay. So here we see my Gmail, and it's currently in the default inbox, which will be the same case for you the first time you open up your Gmail. There's a few different inbox types that we'll cover later on in this series. Right off the bat here, we can see that the navigation portion of our Gmail is on the left side of the screen. This is where we'll be able to navigate different categories like our inbox, things that have been marked starred or important here, different chats, sent mail, drafts, very familiar to other email services. You can see as well I have a few different labels here which we'll discuss later on. And we'll draw our attention to the main portion of the screen. This is where our inbox is going to be located. In the default version of Gmail, we have a few different inboxes: a primary inbox, a social inbox, promotions, updates, and forums. We'll discuss each of those in a little more length as well. And the last portion I'd like to draw your attention to is the search bar at the top. This is where you'll be able to enter in any search prompts or queries to find specific mail that you'd like to access quickly. And that is a brief introduction to the interface. Again, we'll touch on each of these particular portions and individual parts of this series, but those are the important things to know. Let's talk a little bit about composing, editing, and sending mail now. In this portion of the video here, we're going to talk about real basic things, things that you should probably be familiar with from use of different email services in the past, but if you've never used email before or the like, we're going to go ahead and cover them anyway. Things like basic text formatting, carbon copies and blind carbon copies, how to use attachments, managing your drafts, deleting the ones that you wouldn't like to send, for instance, simply sending an email, and then also resizing that composition window to your liking. So let's go ahead and switch back over to Gmail here. And when you go to compose a email, we will go ahead and click the compose button. And that will bring up our new message window, our composition window in the lower right hand corner. Pay no attention to this, what's called an email signature here. We'll talk about adding and editing those in a later video in this series. As well as this send button here is a kind of a plug-in integration with an additional app that you will not see initially, so don't worry about that. So just a quick overview of the composition window here. We have a field for two, so your recipients, subjects. This is where you're going to be able to add carbon copies. By clicking that, you'll see an additional field added, as well as blind carbon copies. The difference between those two being that anyone marked as a recipient in the to field or carbon copy will be visible to all other recipients, whereas recipients that are attached as blind carbon copies are not going to be viewable. And as I said, we have a subject field here, and then of course our text field where we can enter all our content. If we want to draw our attention down to the bottom of the composition window, this is where we can access our formatting options. So all of our text formatting, our font size, um, font faces, bold, underlined, italicized, color, alignment, any of your familiar text formatting commands. And this is also where we can remove formatting with this button at the end here. So if you do something that you don't like, simply click to remove the formatting. Using attachments, a similar symbol here to other email services as a paperclip is how you attach files. Once you click that, a file explorer will open for you to choose a file to attach. Being Gmail, this also allows you to insert files directly from Drive with this icon here. Clicking that icon is going to open up your Drive file explorer like so, and you can select a file to attach from there. This is where you can also insert images, links, emoticons, things like that. To discard the draft that you're working on directly, you can do so from this icon right here. And lastly, we'll talk a little bit about some options we have as far as the size of this composition window goes. For me, the initial window here, the default window, is a little small. I like a little more space to work with, and I also like it to be more in the center of my screen, so I'm going to take you through how to do that. If you go to the More Options button here and go ahead and click, you can select what's called Default to Full Screen, and we'll talk about other options later on in this series. So we're going to go ahead and click Default to Full Screen and discard this draft that we've been working on. And this time when we go and hit Compose, we have a much bigger full screen composition window to work with, which is my preferred window. So we simply did that by, again, enabling the default to full screen option. Another option you have is to do what's called popping out your window. This will give you a separate window entirely that you can resize to a specific size. So you can see here that this is the resizing icon here to go to full screen or not. Again, we just set it to do so by default when composing, but you'll see another option when you hover over this button saying Shift for pop out. So if we hold Shift as we're hovering over this, we see that arrow switch to one singular arrow. So, and again, actually hold Shift and then hover over and you'll be able to see that arrow change. So clicking that is going to pop out that composition window into its own tab. And now we are free to resize it however we see fit, or move it wherever we would like on the screen to a different screen, etc., etc. So that ends the video on Gmail's interface, as well as basic composition, editing, and sending of messages. In part 2 of the series, we're going to cover the real nuts and bolts of working with Gmail, working within email and the Gmail service. So that's all I have for you in this edition. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in part 2 of the Gmail video tutorial series. Thanks again.